Now I want you to watch this. This is why.
When reflecting upon
Europeans do what
ancient
they do.
biblical
Listen.
records, we do not have the advantage of modern genetic research as it relates to determining
I do this
genealogy.
for y'all. Just know that. It's the good.
However, a logical
That prevails.
method for establishing some sort of classification would be to separate the lineages of each
Black Dad
bloodline
Original TV.
and
Second link.
deduct from
Go
them
subscribe.
again based upon nation in a comparison of morality. Most modern psychologists, however, will argue and say morality is subjective in matter, therefore it varies culturally and is objectively unquantifiable.
And that's a lie.
Basically,
It's
they
an excuse.
assert that
Here's
morality
quantifying.
is a concept which is culturally molded into people over
Morality.
time, and that right and wrong are merely ideas.
Right and wrong is ideas.
So
You see how
getting
they
back to
justify
the
what
original
they
question,
doing?
what motivates men to act as they do? What would motivate men to create elaborate, grandiose lies about world history?
World history.
What would they stand to gain by totally
Concocting
concocting
a lie.
history?
History.
Could it be so simple, a people with no history needing to create one in order to fool the world into believing they were superior?
See that right there? And they know they ain't packing like that.
And naturally, that would start with rewriting history and changing maps of the world. Unfortunately for them, the Torah is also a history book
Torah.
and the
They hate
foundation
the Torah too.
of
That's what the
earthly
Bible is.
wisdom.
I don't believe the American Negro.
Within the pages of Scripture, read the true history of Earth.
See, we were the
And the
keepers of the
nations.
book. And they took it from us and rewrote it, making revelations and all these other things from one book that we had. That's why you don't like the Bible.
And
They
although
programmed it
the
under, like,
ages have transliterated
the
this
truth anyway, not the
scripture
First Testament.
into a watered-down version of its former self,
They want you to read the
the
Second
information
Jesus,
combined
the First
within
Testament.
annihilates
Testament. That's the truth.
the heathenistic stance upon ancient history in the Americas.
They lied. They lied to you. They lied to me. They lied to them. They lied to her, him, everybody. No.
Bloodlines play a major role in world control.
They lied to you.
And this goes much deeper than just
They lied to you.
racism.
They lied to you.
Intermarriage has played a major role in the genetic development of the
Like the Aboriginal baby.
geography in the Americas. From the days of old, the lineages of Shem, Ham, and Japheth have long been intertwined with one another, which means that America was the first melting pot of the nations of men. The sons of Japheth have been dwelling in the tents of Shem since the times of Madai, and Canaanites were first to break the oath by dwelling in the lands of Shem. That puts all three sons with different bloodlines, all in the same land at the same time. The question is,
Listen.
were one of these sons Mongoloid? Or was the other son Caucasian? Did these races of men even exist during the time of ancient pre-antiquity?
Let me tell you something. Yep, them came down and switched everything up.
The sons of Jacob married women of different nations and had children. Judah and Simeon married Canaanites,
Twice.
which at the time was punishable by death.
After the flood, too.
Hagar, Abraham's wife, was Egyptian, as well as Joseph's wife. Esau married a Hittite woman, and his grandson Zepho left and went to Chittim, which is in the Mediterranean, in the islands between Africa and Europe. Esau was mingled amongst heathens in the lands of Japheth since before Israel came up out of Egypt.
Esau was mingled amongst heathens in the lands of Japheth since before Israel came up out of Egypt.
Which means that by the time of Columbus and the quote, discovery of the Americas, this land was well known.
Well
In fact,
known. It's
all the heathen nations
This is the old
had either
world.
been pushed
America
out
is the old
or
world.
destroyed by the time of Joshua and
Took 'em all
in
out.
the generations post-Exodus and the overthrow of Canaan.
So
Many of
they
the
talking
nations west of the Euphrates were in the hands of Israel, for which under the covenant
about. Our nation.
the land truly belonged.
Now, this is what happened. Check this out.
Why do all modern genetic studies completely misrepresent the copper nations of people that resided in America before the arrival of Europeans?
Smithsonian got a gag order on all history before 1492.
They have continued to push this lie so far to the point that entire industries have been erected upon this fraud. And yet, those who subscribe to this fraud dogmatically believe this lie without question. Even through their own fabricated history, it has been universally accepted that the Vikings arrived in the Americas before Columbus, which means that those interactions between Vikings and Indians preceded those between Indians and conquistadors. According to their own records, Vikings reached the Americas in Vinland as early as the year 1000. These Vikings were from the direct lineage of Gog and Magog and had conquered several territories throughout Europe and Central Asia, including Kiev and the Khazarian capital. According to Encyclopedia Britannica, the Viking Rurik dynasty took control of territories in Slavic and Finno-Ugric dominated areas of Eastern. The rulers of the top kingdoms in Europe had no knowledge of America.
That's a lie.
As in most cases with world history, the public cares not to explore the intricacies of their deception. They only care that they are well-informed puppets propagating that deception. That's the power of education, a society that rewards well-indoctrinated fiction for those who perform the works of evil while standing on a mound of deceit for trinkets of approval.
There you go.
They are the sphinx that guards the veil for the gatekeepers of transparent doors with pickable locks. Only there is no door and no veil. Only the guard dog protecting an illusion.
An illusion. That's why they don't want you to put anything on YouTube that illuminates this lie. But I'm gonna keep doing it. Fuck y'all. Keep studying y'all black apparition.
Pre-1500, the Americas were still a melting pot of varying genetics. However, according to the first explorers, the Indians were dark brown, light brown, copper, and yellow, with the majority of the population resembling Ethiopians to the explorers. Although the racial makeup of these people was what one would consider the Negro phenotype, there were also documented cases of Mongoloid phenotypes inhabiting the land in much smaller numbers. However, one thing seems to be apparent. The white man, or the complete recessive pale skin color and eye color, was indeed a completely new thing to the people. But that leads us to an even more pressing question. If the Vikings had made it to America 500 years before, why were the indigenous people so surprised by the white man? Quote, perceived views of the Vikings as alternatively violent, biracial heathens or as intrepid adventurers owe much to conflicting varieties of the modern Viking myth that had taken shape by the early 20th century. Current popular representations of the Vikings are typically based upon cultural cliches and stereotypes, complicating modern appreciation for the Viking legacy. End quote. These cliches don't always end with trivial things, such as there was no proof Vikings wore horned helmets and was added for dramatic effect in depictions in later days. Speaking of dramatic license, when people naturally think of a Viking, they usually think of someone who looked like
Norseman,
this. A blonde-haired, blue-eyed, rugged-looking figure, usually attributed to the features of a stereotypical Norseman. But if you remember from earlier episodes, we mentioned the Sami people, who are some of the oldest indigenous populations of Scandinavia. So while a Hollywood version of a Scandinavian or Viking would look like this, in reality, the Vikings look more like this. More like Mongols than the stereotypical Caucasian.
There go your Mongol right there. That's what they look like now. They mixed, they were dark skinned, and now look at them.